Great. So we're going to try here something we've never tried before, which, or we should say we've done some of these discussions at our biomarker summit, but the idea here is that we want to hear from the industry perspective. What is it that you need from our community, from the ALD Connect, from field, from patients, patient advocates, from researchers, in order to accelerate your process of drug development, bringing things from bench to bedside. And then in turn, of course, we want to understand what you're bringing to the table, what kinds of resources, what kind of expertise, what kind of guidance. I think that's probably the one thing we're looking here to for most is how can you help inform what we would do next? And we see you being here as sort of already a sign that you're committed to this field, and we want to understand what is it that in your timeline is looming next in the horizon, and where you would need help from the community at large. I mean, certainly individual physicians can help, but is there something that the community as a whole could rally around? And I also, if so, wanted to each of you speak briefly to that. Here's sort of the questions I guess I posed to each of the industry participants, and I thought would generate a discussion and allow for us to have this conversation. I think there's a pre-competitive space here, really, where multiple companies could also work together and engage in, because we face common challenges, namely, what's the disease course, what's the natural history, what's the window of intervention that should be sought, what are the optimal outcome measures. I think many of these things we can and should do together, and insofar as it might not impact proprietary aspects. I mean, there might be things that are really beyond sort of the IP of your drug that would be meaningful. And I think I would love to have you all be on this industry advisory council we're forming, and hear what your thoughts are, and what concerns you might have about joining an industry advisory council. Okay, so Sanjay, so maybe everybody can just introduce themselves and where they come from, a little background, and any thoughts on this.
Hello? Okay, I think you can hear me now. I'm Sanjay Magavi. I've been here before, so many of you know me. Just for the record, Vertex is working on adrenal leukodystrophy. It's a little inside joke that's not very funny, evidently, but anyway. So, so I started Vertex about 6 years ago. We started working on multiple sclerosis, where some very interesting approaches there. And recently we've become interested in adrenal leukodystrophy. And I'm sort of leading our adrenal leukodystrophy group at Vertex. I'm sort of championing this, and I think it's a great opportunity for us. And I definitely think a lot about these questions that Florian brought up. I think questions 2 and 3, I think the benefits to engaging with ALD Connect are pretty obvious, pretty straightforward. But I think questions 2 and 3 are very interesting. So ALD is a rare disease, and I'm not saying anyone here doesn't know. So finding patients for the clinical trials is really going to be key. And this patient portal, I think, is going to be extraordinarily important. The newborn screening is really key to convincing our clinical people that, there's a population here, they're patients we can help. And I think when people are thinking about signing up for the patient portal and putting their information there, should remind them it's not just an academic exercise for some sort of scientific paper. Industry seeing that there are a lot of engaged patients and seeing there's a lot of information out there makes this much more attractive, and it makes it a much easier sell for me to, my management. And I think in terms of other obstacles and opportunities in pre-competitive space, I think the clinical trials in AMN are going to be, challenging for a lot of industry. The symptoms that people are tracking so far are somewhat subtle, or more importantly, they progress relatively slowly. So that makes for a long clinical trial. And I think that the sort of biomarker we need is sort of a metric showing that patients really feel that a therapeutic is improving their life. And that's really the key thing. I think these more behavioral type biomarkers, I think Ali presented some of Kathleen's work, the balance board, that seemed really attractive and very interesting to me. Perhaps even more so than a lot of these biochemical biomarkers, something that really reflects how the patients are feeling. And I think that's something we'd be very much willing to work on in the pre-competitive space. Concerns about joining an IAC? I don't think I really have any serious concerns about that. So I will hand it off to Kendrick.
And I'm Kendrick Goss. And so as you can see, Bluebird's a competitive, and Asif and I were competing here. But he's going to opine from his seat in the audience. But what I know is important for both Asif and myself, and the reason that we're here, and for the entire company in terms of being involved with ALD Connect, is to come and listen and hear what's important to the ALD patient community. And so if as a company with a particular technology you have what you think is a great solution, I think that it's really critical for folks in industry to actually listen to what's important, what's going to lead to an improvement in the quality of life inside the community. And so that's the primary reason that we are here, is to learn and to engage with the physicians and the patients and other folks from the industry. And this sort of forum creates a unique atmosphere for that. And so the obstacles that we are facing in terms of treatments for ALD and AMN are obviously figuring out whether or not our own therapies are providing the benefits that we think that they might be, that might be well received in the community and important. But the preclinical, the pre-competitive space is probably where, if I'm working my way down our list of questions here, the pre-competitive space speaks to that, to understanding the disease better. And so the resource of ALD Connect that I recognized as super important to my own interest and work was this idea of the biorepository and creating a genetic resource that did not exist in the ALD and AMN community, that was something that was accessible not as a resource uniquely for Bluebird Bio, for instance, but to the other researchers and the physicians who were actually contributing those samples to that biobank. If we were able to identify biomarkers that could benefit the entire community, then that's a benefit. Of course, that's a benefit to Bluebird, but it is a benefit that is independent of the company itself. I think that the thing that Bluebird recognizes is that if the company better understands, or if the community better understands the disease, if the biomarkers that are available not only for early diagnosis and newborn screening are available, then we have the opportunity to do things like track adrenal function from the age of birth. This is a new set of experiments that these new biomarkers put us in a position to track. So that's why I'm personally most excited about being involved in this community. The concerns that we would have about being a part of an industry advisory council is the fact that it's a ballet, right? So it's an opportunity to learn from the community, to inform that community about treatment options, to find patients for clinical trials, etc. But the choreography is making sure that transparency and trust is maintained. And so what I have learned about my discussions with physicians and patients with the efforts to collect samples for biomarkers is that trust is the keystone that will, first of all, make the study happen, but second, establish Bluebird as a full participant in providing a benefit to the whole, to the entire patient population. So that's where I'm at.
Hi, my name is Sheila DeWitt. I'm the president and CEO of Deuterix. It's a small biotech company, and we have a drug going into preclinical development, which is an improved version of pioglitazone. So my focus is to move that from the top of that left hand, where Kendrick have it, over to here. But it's I can tell you more about the drug later, but it's an improved version. The benefits of joining is this network, and I love the fact that there's a combination of academic, industry, and clinicians from around the globe. I think sharing ongoing and emerging insights into ALD is important. Obviously, sitting through the work group products was amazing how little is known about this horrendous disease. And yet the newborn screening is just going to open up so many opportunities for this group. In terms of the obstacles that we face in advancing treatments, because we're in preclinical development and we want to go to a pre-IND meeting with the FDA, we need to define what the clinical trials look like, and whether that's trials or biomarkers, and we want a shorter trial. I'm not sure we want a 2-year walking trial. And when you look at those graphs, is it really walking that we want to look at? So there's a big question mark. And so talking to anyone in this room or the people on this panel is extremely helpful for us. We have ideas, but we want to make sure that we get a drug into the clinic and learn from that. We want to take it forward in patients. We know that there's a number of opportunities for drugs or treatments. And it's most important to get it across that valley of death, whether it's the perfect drug or not. That really goes to some of the concerns. There aren't really, initially there are no concerns, but then it becomes, can people from industry share openly ideas and what they're doing? We're a small biotech. We can share a lot. I'm the president, so I can decide what I can, talk about. But, can the people, but people from Vertex or Genzyme or, the bigger companies have limitations. So that's important. Again, I said it's important to get something to the patients, whether it's pediatric or adults, and to make sure that there's something out there. If this group is formed, if it's a formal group, what are the goals? Are they clearly defined? I think the work groups did a good job of defining the goals, but if there's an industry advisory committee, what are those goals? I think where we could help perhaps right away, and there, when I saw the triangle diagram. It just raises lots of questions. I think that's where people from industry can help, put some insights into, oh yeah, I know that drug, it was studied here, or I know this investigator, and really add some clarity to why did it move from the left to the right or not. So that's probably an area where we can provide guidance. Thank you.
So my name is Mark Shearman. This is the first ALD Connect meeting I've been to, so I really appreciate being able to participate. So my background is mostly in pharmaceutical companies, Merck & Co., and then Merck Serono in the neurodegenerative disease, neuropsychiatry, and neuromuscular disorders. I'm here today because I'm now the Chief Scientific Officer of Applied Genetics Technology Corporation, AGTC, which is a gene therapy company based in Florida, focusing on orphan ophthalmology diseases. But as some of you may have read, we recently initiated a collaboration with Biogen, and one of the preclinical programs is in the ALD area. So that's my introduction and my purpose in attending. I saw for me, the first two questions here, or the first 2 points, are somewhat interrelated. So in my career, which has been mostly Alzheimer's disease, there are always lots of choices you have to make when you're trying to develop a drug. And one of the important things to have is, as much and the most accurate information as possible. So I see the benefits of engaging with ALD Connect really is to better understand exactly the problem that I'm trying to solve, how I can solve it, and do it in a way that provides the most benefit to the patients. And so really, I think that speaks to the first two. The obstacles really, we have a good idea of what we could do from a gene therapy perspective for ALD. And obviously, when you make these decisions and choices, that usually entails several years of work and a lot of resource. And so it's really critical that you make the right choice. And I think at this point in time, based on being new into the area, but my observation is there are still a few different choices and different paths that we could take to develop therapies. I'm a big fan of pre-competitive consortia and working together. So in my previous life, I helped set up the Massachusetts Life Science Center Neuroscience Consortium, which was actually 7 major pharmaceutical companies all working together to identify and fund novel target research in mostly neurodegenerative diseases. And my experience there was that it was really important to not waste time and effort by repeating and competing in an area where there was no need for competition, and that actual collaboration was much more beneficial. So essentially the outcome of that consortium was that the 7 pharma partners shared information, resources, and dollars to fund early stage preclinical target validation in the greater Massachusetts area. And I think there could be an opportunity also in ALD for something like this, meaning for the industry companies who have an interest in this area to really think about not spending the same money on doing the same thing when you can simply share the information. So I would encourage, I don't know if it can be in exactly the same format as the previous consortium, but I think there's an opportunity. And then my concerns about joining Industry Advisory Council, I don't really have concerns. I think one thing that really upsets me is when the discussions in public about pharma and biotech are all about money making and no interest in patients. And for me, that for 99.9% of my career, that's totally the wrong perspective. Most of the people that I have worked with and I work with now are really focused on doing good and doing things well. So I hope that if we're part of this Industry Advisory Council working with you, then you see what our true intentions are. And I think that can only be beneficial for both sides.
Thanks, Mark. My name is Jim Lillie, and I'm with Genzyme, a Sanofi company. I thought Florian said it really well this morning, that really to bring help, value to patients requires a village. It's not about a company. It's not about only physician scientists. It's really about the relationships between the patients, the physician scientists, and the and industry. And I think at Genzyme, I think we have a very long experience, 25 years now, where I think we've really spearheaded the idea that by working first with patients and understanding what patients need and want, that's really the key to success. And so I think there's been a lot of discussion this morning about outcomes that patients care about, and understanding that better would be really helpful. It seemed like there were some ideas about that were quite distinct from what I had thought about movement. And so it'd be good to understand how reliable those new ideas are. Is it really pain? Is it really adrenal function, or is it really, although motion didn't get a very high score, is that still really very important? And so it'd be great to work through that better, to understand what types of medicines, what types of mechanisms would be helpful to patients. So we really start with the patient and try to build relationships with the patients and the communities. And part of that relationship building for us is really to introduce patients to our scientists. So for all the diseases that we work on, these patients are not statistics, but they are real people, and we introduce them to our scientists. And by doing so, I think we bring a lot more motivation to the people that are working on the projects, because they understand who they're trying to help and what they're trying to do. And so that's part of my reason to come here, is to start to begin to develop those relationships. I think as others have already said very clearly, I think there are a number of gaps in our ability to generate new medicines that we hope to be able to bridge by coming here. And those extend from the clinic in terms of meaningful endpoints, back through preclinical models that represent the pathophysiology of disease, all the way back to understanding mechanisms. What is really critical is the accumulation of very long chain fatty acids, the point of intervention that's required, or is that just a biomarker of the genetic defect? What is the true cause of the disease, and what is it that we really need to fix? So I think going all the way from the end, from the clinical relevance back to the beginning is really important. And this collection of patients and patient advocates and scientists and industry really, I think, create that community that allows us to begin to address and answer those questions and have a better, clearer idea before we start about what we'd like to do. So I think this is really exciting that the ALD Connect is trying to bridge multiple communities and learn from other communities, rather than splinter into multiple patient advocacy groups that are then vying for patients and for clinical trials, as we've seen in other rare diseases. So I think that's really a really exciting difference that I see here that brings me here, is that I think that this really has a lot of promise for us to help fight this disease. So I think others have already said a lot of things that draw me here, and I would really just echo their thoughts. And for pre-competitive space, I think people have mentioned biomarkers, disease models, understanding the mechanism of disease, clinical trial design. Those are all important aspects that could be considered pre-competitive space.
Hi. So I think I am one of the newest comer in this meeting, or the ALD area. So just I came from Japan 1 year before, and now working in the biotech called MightBridge, close to the Harvard Square, and that company is working for the mitochondria modifier, and it is not necessary to say the ALD is the main indication for our drug candidates, but so I think I saw one of the mitochondria-related drug and EPI compound in a list of the working group, and then something like that. So I think the mitochondria control drug can be efficacious to this ALD. So now the our compound is still in a very early stage. So now we are doing some preclinical the studies with our compound in the ALD area. So still, as I mentioned, that I'm a very newcomer in this ALD world. So I still need to learn much about the disease. So I think this is a very nice opportunity for me to understand what is the medical needs and what is the model and what is now ongoing in this area. So that's great. And I need to say, so I'm actually working as a visiting scientist and come from the Japanese pharma company called Astellas. So because the MitoBridge and Astellas is a collaboration, exclusive collaboration. So my perspective is not only from the biotech point of view, but also the little bit bigger company in Japan. So the two attract the company like Astellas or a much bigger company in here is I think it needs to show the regulatory path. What is the regulatory path for that disease? And also, I think the ALD is one of the disease which has the variety of the symptom and the progression of the disease is varied. So in that case, I think the biomarker to know the efficacy of the compound in a short time is very important. So I think the working group, maybe 2 or 3, already cover this kind of point. But I'd like to emphasize these points are very important to attract the companies now outside of the ALD world, like Astellas. I think. And one thing I want to add is one of my friend in Japan is the leader of the patient advocacy group of the ALD. So I think this is a very good opportunity for me to contact you guys to the Japanese patient group and and expand the power of the patient group to the worldwide. So thank you.
So a round of applause for that. Actually, I love that. So we're already seeing tangible benefits here. So, Ali,
is this on? I noticed basically, aside from Bluebird, all other companies here are working at the preclinical stage, and all seem to have mutual interest, which is really trying to identify what are the best markers for either it's a biomarker or outcome measures that should be looked at. So, so I think in that terms, everybody I think in this room is in agreement. The question I would have is, what do you think from a pharma perspective could your individual companies, or let's not even get into that level of detail, what could industry do for us as ALD Connect so that we can deliver what you all think is important? And how can we do that without running into a priority issue? Because I think this is really a pre-competitive space, delivering these sort of biomarkers.
Great. So maybe we can just go around and actually, I think that's an important theme. Like now turning the table, so to speak, and saying what resources can you bring into this? And we're talking, partly financial, but also resources. And Kendrick, you've brought certain technology and gene sequencing into this, and Mark, you spoke about mass life science. It'd be interesting what did in that setting the different pharma companies bring to the table, and what were they willing to contribute, maybe share, and how did that actually work? So, you want to use that?
Point out for you that one of the big donations that Bluebird has made is just time. Microphone, please. Point out that Bluebird's put in a lot of time. They've put people on some of the work groups, 3-4 people four at least that I can think of. And that's been a huge boon, because for many of us, time is the limiting resource. And money is money, but time for most of us is, many of us are doing this after hours and free time. And so I would just put that out there as a tremendously valuable resource in addition to everything else.
I think short term specifically, one of the things that we'd like to do is we have, I think, some really excellent platform technologies that will help with biomarker discovery, and we would hope to get access to samples for that platform with clinical annotations, and we would share those data back. So it wouldn't, I think there would be wins on both sides immediately from it wouldn't be as if that those samples were just going into a blind sack in terms of there would be no feedback.
So I would say, to address the one point, I think one of the important agreements that we reached in the consortium that I was involved with was that everybody at the table would have equal access to anything that evolved from the discussion or from the consortium. So within the same group of people, you had, smallish biotech through to several large pharma. And so one of the concerns that was expressed early on was that, well, if I'm a small biotech, I'm never going to compete when it comes to licensing or getting access to future information, because the big pharma companies just have deeper pockets and so on. So one precedent we set early on was that if people participated, that everybody got access to information, data equally, and nobody was excluded. And essentially what happened was that the academic institutions who were funded by the consortium essentially had to agree to negotiate non-exclusively with any of the consortium members who wanted access to IP or models or resources at some point in the future. So that's one example that, to think about in terms of, you have 6 representatives from 6 different companies at the table here. That would be one of the ground rules, I guess, to start the discussion between industry and the ALD Connect.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think I'd said that before. And, for a small biotech compared to a big pharma, we can't provide a large resource in funding. So we're raising funds on our own, but, maybe we have tools, the drugs that we have that can be tools for research, right? An improved version of PO, or looking at PO. And what we've learned, and sharing that data, as you were saying, Mac, and sharing what we know and what we've learned, even pre-publication, is something that we can help share insights. And like what I was saying to Kendrick, is helping build that database of knowledge around what's out there, what other therapies may apply.
So, So a year ago, whenever I presented the overall plan that I had to use Bluebird Bio resources to do sequencing of samples from the ALD Connect biobank. I really, I'm not sure what I expected. Boxes of of DNA coming in the mail. What it led to was a much longer and much more nuanced conversation that was not only about the author list, on the final publication, but it was about protecting the privacy of the patients and respecting the contributions that each of the physicians and patients are making to the outcome, and making sure that that's recognized in the final outcome. And so what we've ended up with is a little bit of a hodgepodge, but it turns out to be a process of collecting samples and then sending those data back to the physicians who were able to contribute that through the permissions of their IRB, and make sure that relationship of trust is maintained, that all of the rules are being followed, and that the bioinformaticists in the team at Bluebird with the de-identified data can then do analysis that is then distributed to the group, and then the correlation is made with the clinical with the clinical outcomes and the phenotypes. And so rather than coming up with sort of a dramatic overarching policy, which would be sort of, I guess, ideal, it's turned out to be a different relationship with each participant that actually turns out to be better in the long run, because each organization is going to have a different set of rules to contribute and a different set of concerns. So that leads to a deeper conversation. And so I think what we have learned is that we should start that conversation rather than simply sending emails to people asking what they might have available. But what I would like this what this genetics project can contribute to the community is essentially those genetic data that may correlate with those clinical and phenotypic outcomes in Neurobank. And so that would be what we would hope to contribute to that conversation.
So I think Vertex has some experience in this area. They actually started a consortium looking for behavioral metrics for multiple sclerosis, and some folks at Vertex, I think, had a very innovative approach that I think a lot of people are adopting now, which was looking at cell phones to measure people's activity levels, to give them sort of mini clinical tests that they could do frequently, so you could get a much more fine-grained measurement of their function. And I think it'd be great if we could somehow bring this technology to bear on AMN or ALD.
I could jump in and ask a question. So I'm one of the clinician scientists at Stanford. Although I think it's fair to say that a good number of our audience here and listening in online will not know what an industry advisory council is or looks like. I wonder if you guys, someone might take a stab at proposing a practical, several of you who worked on committees, kind of a practical way that what it looks like and how, if you could set one up from scratch, working with things that worked in the past and things that didn't, what it might look like for ALD Connect and an industry advisory council that might work here. In other words, what are the practical mechanics of who's on the committee, how often it would meet, what sort of structures are provided. I mean, again, just a first stab off the cuff for a kind of a general audience. What is it? What does it do? And what might it look like for ALD Connect?
So whenever Florian mentioned this to me the first time, and coming from a research background where obvious biochemical or genetic experiments sort of presented themselves because the tools were available or the models were relevant in whatever space that was in, I had no idea what the FDA might be asking in terms of endpoints or measurable outcomes. And so I think that one of the valuable things that an industry council like this could provide to the research community is a sense of, will the data that they are generating in a research lab be relevant and provide sort of a motive force in an FDA approval process?
I'm not questioning the value. I just only saying.
No, I'm saying that it's one of the values of a group like this, because working just across the street here, I had no idea what an FDA regulatory sort of approval process would look like and what a relevant endpoint was.
So I think part of the question that Keith is raising is sort of what's the concrete structure of this, and I think we all have sort of rallied around the concept and the idea that this is a good thing, and now the question is how would we implement it, right? And I think this is sort of an exciting time where we can all think together what would be the best way forward. And I was thinking maybe actually since Jen Farmer is here, and you and the Friedreich Ataxia Research Association has done such a great job over the last decade, defining their space and understanding how to bring all the players together and how to make progress. And and bring people to the table. Maybe you have some ideas on what works and what doesn't work. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I'm happy to share some of our learning. So we don't have a specific industry advisory council. We have a scientific advisory board, but there's equal representation of industry and academic scientists. So I think that that voice is valuable to us because there are different needs from each different community. So that's our advisory board meets face to face once a year, reviews our research portfolio in terms of what we're funding, and helps give us some guidance. Practically, for example, there's an issue with some of our mouse models, and this is a big issue for our industry partners. And so sitting down with them and discussing further what's needed in a new model has helped us then drive some work that we've funded with Jack's Labs to try and bridge that gap. So there's some practical...
No, that's great. So a very concrete question. So if there are industry partners on that scientific board who are advising on what should be funded or not, are they themselves also the funding source, or how does that work?
A little bit of both. Sometimes FARA is the funding source, and sometimes we partner. So it just depends on the scope and the size of the project and what's needed. Just this past year, we did something a little bit different. We've got the same issues with biomarkers. And so we hosted a biomarker meeting a year ago that was equal representation of industry and academic. And at the end of the meeting, it was a 2-day meeting, and at the end of the meeting, we said, we need to leave here with a prioritized list of what we should do. Which research studies, which investigations should we start with to find better biomarkers? And then what we've done is put together a consortium, a working group, around different areas of biomarkers. And so FARA and the companies are co-funding the research in different areas. And we've figured out over the last 12 months the legal agreements that need to be in place. But as ALD Connect would be, you're contracting with the academic institutions who are going to collect the samples or even do some of the research. And then you're also contracting with the industry partner who's providing funding and also intellectual input into the design and execution and analysis of the data that comes out. And it's a true consortium. So we've kind of done a few different types of councils, but a biomarker specific one that I wanted to mention, since that was, I think it falls into that pre-competitive space. It's a great way to partner. And 12 months in, we've gotten past the major hurdle, which is the contracting. So
that's great. Yeah, no, I see a lot of similarities, and clearly we're sort of at more of an early stage, but clearly we have work groups that are working on relevant topics, and you'll hear in more depth from Kathy Zakowski and Keith about some of the natural history and what is known and where we can actually identify the gaps. But as each work group is continuing to build, I think one possible model would be to have one-page proposals coming out of these work groups that would then be reviewed by an industry advisory council as to the level of relevance to the problems you're trying to solve, right? And understanding what kind of value that would have for you. And I imagine between our work groups, the Industry Advisory Council and the board, not to continue the analogy that Kendrick raised of the dance, but we could find a way of having a feedback loop and process of revision and feedback on proposals that would go back to the work groups, and then hopefully also get some collective funding. Now my goal is to get Kathleen O'Sullivan Thornton really busy with contracting. That's my goal here. So, but I think now is the time where we could gather information on different models and gather different templates, maybe from Mass Life Sciences, maybe from FARA. I know there's a toolkit that Tara also shared on. I think it came from the Global Genes venue or somewhere else, where there is information that could be reviewed by our esteemed lawyers, and that would help give us a sense of whether we're on the right track. What do you think, Jen? Too bold?
No, I think that's exactly what you need, because the point that was made earlier, everybody reviews different studies through a different lens, right? So the lens that the industry partners are going to look at different proposals on and how they're going to prioritize them are very different. And so some mechanism like that works. That's what works for us as well. We specifically have a review process for different projects and proposals that we would consider funding or even co-funding. And, one of our industry advisory council members or, scientific advisory board members from industry reviews those for us.
So let's see.
So Florian, you said you said two things that are, I think, very fundamental here. One is resource and one is feedback. Industry members are part of work groups, and then from there, work groups can come up with proposals that could be consulted to the advisory board that would be made of those members that are part of that work group and the other members that were not part of that work group. But also then about that feedback, ALD Connect should be perceptive of that, should receive it well and should try to implement it, because if it doesn't go through first time or second time, then board may not be very eager to provide that feedback. And second, feedback should also be about one thing that we're missing here is about management styles. What industry partners can also give to all academia and advocacy groups also is how they work, how is the management styles in that companies are that can help the other partners too. So what I'm trying to say is here, big pharma, it's going on in pharma too. So see how Boston has a small biotech companies and they are more robust and they can get things done faster, and then big industry also say, well, let's go to Boston and get that style too. I think that is one thing that academia can learn from there too. Patient advocacy groups can learn that too, and that's one thing that we can provide as far as other groups are willing to learn from us.
It's a great point. That process of feedback and revision and the workflow surrounding that, I think one of the reasons we've ramped up some of our project management, and I think between Rosina and Priya and Inna, there has to be a solid plan fleshed out on how the communication would work between the work groups and the industry advisory council back to the board, back to the work groups, and what the timeline is. And we have to be relatively clear and have defined cutoffs. And I'll put this out there. So I was a little bold in assuming that all of you would like to be part of an industry advisory council. And as I approached Biogen about sponsoring this meeting, they said, "Oh, no, it's too short notice." So I said, "How about that one-day meeting in December, which is the industry advisory council kickoff meeting?" And they said, "Yes." So we actually already have a date where we could have a meeting together, and I was really not doing this with intention of foregoing anything, but I just thought it would be sort of a nice timeline where we could meet here locally again, and would also maybe give the work groups some time to come up with, maybe one or two proposals that they would like to present to the Industry Advisory Council. And I think that would be a scenario where we would say, okay, this is appropriate, or maybe this is not appropriate for funding or for support or for other resources that the Industry Advisory Council wants to support. So anyhow, now I feel I'm blushing under my Indian skin, but I thought, there's no time as the president, and why not, sketch that out, and if it doesn't work, we'll try something else, right? But that might be a possible stab at it. Ali, Keith, Josh, others?
Just one additional thing to keep in mind as you grow the council. This is a little bit harder to attain, but if you can get people from industry who are also have no connection to ALD, that will be helpful down the road. That's something we've had to do recently. Part of what we have our advisors look at is our treatment pipeline, and try and help us, prioritize new things as they come into the pipeline, because resources are limited. And if you're thinking about having multiple clinical trials ongoing at the same time and what ALD Connect can support, you're going to need some people who don't have any connection. And that's been really valuable to us recently. The other thing too, if you can broaden the net a little bit in terms of this advisory council, is even at the level of drug discovery. Some of the stuff coming out of our drug discovery work is bringing up compounds that are really well known and been vetted in companies. And you can save a lot of time and resources by being able to tap into somebody and just say, hey, what do you know about, this type of inhibitor? Why hasn't this been developed? Or what were the challenges with developing this? And that's been really valuable to us in the last few years.
That's great. I mean, this is sort of really expands also the role of the advisory council. Could be sort of also a vetting of targets, so to speak. And so I agree. I think there's a very exciting possible dynamic that could start happening here.
I think one of the issues that deserves to be discussed is that it's the way I think we see it is that the Industry Advisory Council would not just advise ALD Connect, but would also beneficially advise each other. And you go as a company, have a pre-IND meeting with the FDA, the variables that you're going to be told by the FDA are likely going to be the same variables that you're going to be told if you're a different company. And I think that's, again, a space that everybody would benefit from sharing particular kinds of information. And I could see ALD Connect being that resource that could share those sort of things. That's something we could be thought about. Maybe we should be part of those meetings to some degree. I don't know. I mean, that's just it's just a brainstorming kind of idea. But I think there is a role for ALD Connect to bring industry together, not only so that they advise us, but that there will be interaction in between that may enhance and get the therapies faster going. So ideally, we'd like to test 3 therapeutics in 2 years rather than, do one trial that takes 3 years and then do the next one that takes another 3 years. And the best therapeutic is going to make it.
Maybe even a joint meeting with FDA on critical innovation pathway meeting where there's several companies that are coming around, sort of, rallying around the same problem in question to FDA. Wouldn't that be great? I think it's about efficiency, really. We don't want to duplicate things, for each drug target. I think we should understand what a common forum and platform could be. Great.
Florian, as I'm listening to the discussion and really enjoy, it is at a nascent state with regards to an industry advisory council, perhaps gaining an identity. And the ALD Connect organization and Industry Advisory Council can have aligned but also separate goals and objectives. And my thinking is that a council can really gain momentum if that group can come up with a set of shared pre-competitive objectives that are important to the ALD organization, but also to that group specifically, something that that group can own in a pre-competitive space. And we've had many discussions around those. That can also lead to funding, and that can then lead to a pre-competitive program within which that can move forward. So my take is, yes, great, focused objectives, timelines, funding can make it take off, and ALD Connect can then enable that. That's just in stepping through this thinking.
No, I completely agree. I think that's very exciting. I think, coming back to the questions I raised, and I love all the responses and really appreciate all the feedback, and so part of the challenge here is in this choreography to be on the same timeline, and sometimes I sort of channel what patients convey to me, which is that they're not patient, they're impatient, right? And so sometimes it's a speed question that causes the tension, and I think what we want to understand as a community is, yes, there is real urgency, and I think that urgency can be used, and there certainly will be times where that urgency is can cause friction, and I think as a community we should understand that and be able to listen to each other to make things move nicely and dance in steps, so to speak. But yeah, I think I love all the comments. So maybe we'll break for lunch now, and again, big round of applause for everybody. So.